So all of us go through this and have done this. So we'll talk about variants of Writeshop or variants of how to be able to document things from the field or from other sources. So one of the reasons is we need to reflect. So that's very important. The first thing is to be able to come together, agree, disagree to a point of view. So that the reflection part is very important. That typically happens in a workshop. Then be able to put it in a document form that is agreeable to individuals, organizations, different sectors, and maybe many of these writeshops where participants coming from various sectors such as government, NGOs, academia, research organizations, grassroots level, etc., all coming together and agreeing to a point of view. And then be able to share that information. It's also an opportunity to be able to share the wonderful work. Sometimes when we document our work and we put it on a piece of paper and we say, wow, we didn't realize it was such a wonderful work. This is brilliant, this is excellent, and this is our own work. And every time we are able to document it, we realize it. And we also feel happy that a work that has been done over a period of time, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, now we can share it on a piece of paper, 10 pages, and say, look, this is what we have done. So I think that's a huge strength for any organization or work. Of course, to encourage the culture of knowledge generation and dissemination. So the way I see is that, as I said, there's a lot of data floating around, and we all need to be able to collect the data and transform that into some sort of information, which could be in the form of a report, very stiff, focused, particular direction kind of documentation, and then be able to transform it somehow or the other into a form of a body of knowledge in various forms, be it a newspaper article, be it something written for your website, be it written for publication such as this, and so on and so forth. Ultimately, looking at the, in this case, we are talking about the livelihood practice or the livelihood community in question. So these are some of the reasons why we should think about writeshops or writeshop type of documentation. Okay, and you know, as we say, the first gear is the most difficult because it's slow and it requires a lot of power. So the thrust, even in terms of physics, the first gear actually consumes the most energy. And so in the first gear, in a typical writeshop, and again when you when I'm talking about steps and processes, think about variants already, or if this was done like this, so if we were to do it, we could probably do something. So when I started writing this, I closed my eyes and looked at a typical writeshop and thought what was happening. So generally a core committee or a core team from within the organization or between organizations is set up. And let us say there is a thematic area that we want to document. And then we would say, okay, right, so we want to document, say for example, the role of grassroots organizations in livelihood promotion, just for an example. So if we were to develop something around this, what are the 5, 6, 10 themes that make sense? And this core committee, depending upon who is conducting the writeshop, whether it's one organization or a set of organizations, then brainstorms and says, okay, this is the structure of the publication that we want to have. And so that is the first step. And that requires a lot of good thinking, because then that sets the tone of the entire thing that is to be done later on. And then you delegate roles and responsibilities and say, okay, this is who does this, and etc., etc. And again, as I said, going from data to information and knowledge at the field level is very critical of what you can actually draw out and filter and use that as information. So generally, what is done is you develop a protocol or a format and say, okay, maybe you cannot write as a writer or you're not a brilliant writer or so you think, but you have all the experience in the field. So we're giving you a format and saying, okay, tell us about the family in 10 sentences, and these are the things we want to hear about the household. These are the things we want to hear about the community. These are the things we want to hear about their livelihood interventions. And you give them a set of protocol or format and say, this is how we want the information. Right, so that is the first step. So this team develops the protocol to capture the data and information from the field in a uniform manner. And that much everybody is able to write. And it doesn't at that point matter what kind of language, because it's not actually the structure of the sentence or the paragraph, but the information put in any form of a sentence. And therefore the staff then, or the writer or the participant to the Writeshop, contribute the first version that goes through a standardization process. We already have a standard set or a format, and once you have that, then it's easier to review because you already have something and say, okay, he's talked about he's given a picture of the households, but this and this thing is missing. So we can go back to them and say, we want more information on this and so on and so forth. So now you have more or less more than what you actually need. And it's better to go to a Writeshop than having more than what you need rather than going to a Writeshop and saying, oh, we should have this data or information. Right. So at this stage, you're ready with that. And then this is brought to a Writeshop. So what is a Writeshop? Typically speaking, it's a workshop that writes. And what happens in a workshop? We come to a workshop with all that wonderful discussion. At the end of it, I would say, most cases it's documented by way of a proceeding or something. But a lot of that wonderful discussion is also lost or evaporated somewhere because this documentation is done by an individual or a set of people, 2, 3, 4 people. And they may not necessarily be able to capture your mind or your discussion. So, and this goes very fast, so sometimes we miss out on that. Secondly, by the time you receive those proceedings in a publication form, this team has died down. And it's like, yeah, I remember, I attended this meeting, it was good. And you look at it and you put it in your shelf. So, here is a workshop where people come, critique, debate, discuss, and nothing is lost. Because everything relevant is captured in that document. At the end you can say, nothing that we thought was extremely important is missing. And so that's a great value to this workshop, which is basically a workshop. Generally, documentation that cannot be achieved by individuals. As I said, no individual could be an expert in a field. And even if he or she is an expert, it's very good to kind of debate the point of view and be able to say, we all agree to this. Then thirdly, there is a wider readership because of this, because the point of view is something that is generally accepted by a larger pool of people. It could be various sectors, it could be government people also presenting and saying, wow, we have had Writeshops where we had people from, hey, I work for gender issues, and in your presentation you talk about all the work you do. We do not see the gender focus. What have you done about women? And so they force people to think and extract that information and put it there and make sure it stays there. So they'll say, yeah. And the government says, no, you're critiquing the government is not right, because in many places I can give you examples of very good work that the government departments have done. So you have to tone it down and say in some cases this happens, in some cases there are good examples. So he's also happy with the point of view and so on and so forth. So that, coming together, debating, discussing and agreeing, disagreeing, gives you a wider acceptance and therefore wider readership. So, like a typical workshop, think, and something that a workshop doesn't do, write, present it, and critique it or get critiqued, discuss it and rewrite it, and actually lay it out in the form that the publication is going to be, and present it again. So that by the end of the process, you have more or less the first draft of the camera ready material that is ready to go to the press. And then, you have already in some ways determined the format of the publication. But again, when you come to that workshop, you kind of pre-test it and say, is this the format we want, or is there any debate on this, and agree, disagree, and say, okay, now we want to have this publication in this format, and so on and so forth. So the say of all the participants is so very important. And consolidation of lessons and way forward. Opportunity to educate oneself on the rich experiences, shortfalls and lessons learned. And every Writeshop I have attended is a crash course to me on the subject matter, and it's like, wow, in 5 days, 6 days flat, in some cases 4 days, the longest Writeshop I have attended, this one was 14 days, aquatic livelihood, 14 days, people coming from 12, 15 countries, 14 days, 67 cases and articles. It's a lot of work, But at the end of the event, you get to know so much about the subject, definitely much more than you actually knew before you entered this workshop. So it's a huge crash course on development interventions. And as I said, even this meeting, just by the time we had tea, we quickly had this networking opportunity. Many of us know each other. And for example, when I saw, where is Sudhakar? I saw him and I said, wow, we have met. So that advantage. And this is just an hour of this workshop. But if you spend these 14 days, 6 days, 5 days together, and wow, this is a great networking opportunity. So, to me, there are 4 factors for successful Writeshop. First is partnerships, second is the process, third is the participation, and the fourth, the product itself. And I'll touch each of these. But when I say partnerships, I mean publications. I'll use this example where this was not a publication by the organization which was the International Institute of Rural Reconstruction, but it brought together IDRC Canada, FAO Rome, Network of Aquaculture Centers in Asia Pacific, ICLAM, which is now the World Fish Center, and a couple of donor partners such as Deutsche Welthungerhilfe and the Netherlands Embassy, Southeast Asian Fisheries Development Center, all the major aquatic livelihood players in the region. So what the value of the partnership is that this is no more an IR publication, but this publication belongs to all these organizations, and even today, 12 years later, this is sitting on the website of World Fish Center and FAO and so on and so forth. So the value of partnership, in fact, in many cases, we have had funding opportunities coming from one partner, and we'd say, no, we want others to come in because we want